Alright, so we're going to continue here. This is the Enlightenment Part 2, so you'll finish up with this if you were able to weren't able to come to class. So what we're going through here are the changes. We just talked about art yesterday, and now we're going to get through music, literature, and some other major points that followed the Enlightenment. So the music before Enlightenment was pretty dramatic, and you guys will hear that here. And you'll kind of feel the drama, and you'll understand that this is an organ playing here. So here you go. So as you guys can hear, the drama in this is pretty high. It's not as light and fluffy as some music might be. So if we go on to how music changed during the Enlightenment, you have Mozart and Beethoven. This is Beethoven, this is Mozart. And you can tell in this with the piano, it's a little bit lighter. It's not as dramatic as the last one. Doesn't seem like this one's gonna allow. Oh, maybe. There we go. So what you have here is string music. So this is your more classical style of music that we're used to with the light piano and the string music. So you guys can just tell it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more able to do like a classical dance to or something like that. So hopefully you understand the differences there between what music was before the Enlightenment and how and why it changed afterwards. Another one was literature, and if you guys recall, most people before this time were only reading one thing, and that was the Bible. Well, novels became very popular. People began, remember, literacy rate increased, and so people wanted things to read, and they were using their imagination. So this book here, I'd be interested if anybody knew what it was just from the picture. That is Gulliver's Travels, and this was one of the most popular ones during that time period. One thing that the authors began to use was everyday language. It was written in terms that people could understand. The middle class greatly enjoyed these types of things. Novels and stories became extremely popular. One of the most prominent writers during the time was Jonathan Swift. The impact of the Enlightenment not only impacted art, music, literature, architecture, it also impacted the rulers during that time period. And those rulers, another word for a ruler is called a despot. There was a video we watched a few months ago that had that word in it, and we talked about that in class. I don't expect you to remember that, but we did. So what you have is these rulers here. You got Frederick the Great, Joseph II, and Catherine the Great. So Frederick the Great, what he did, you see the reasons why they're an enlightened despot on the other side. So he granted many religious freedoms, and what you guys should be able to do is you should be able to come up with a philosopher whose ideas they put into practice. So if we're talking about religious freedoms, you should have Voltaire. Reduced censorship, so that would be privacy issues, freedom of speech. So you could throw in John Locke, you could throw Voltaire back again. Improved education, you could throw out Mary Wollstonecraft or Mary Estelle. Reform the justice system, that would be crimes and things, so you should have Beccaria. And abolish torture, also Beccaria. For Joseph II, you have legal reform, you could throw out Beccaria. Freedom of the press, that's free speech, so Voltaire. Freedom of religion would be Voltaire again, and then abolish serfdom. And if you remember what that is, that's the feudal system we talked about before Thanksgiving break. Finally, for Catherine the Great, she had religious freedom, abolished torture, read many works of the philosophers. So that was another word for the philosophers, as they just called them the philosophers. So an enlightened despot was somebody who was a leader who put the Enlightenment ideas into practice. And the alternative to doing that, if you're asking like, well, why didn't all leaders do it? Some leaders were greedy and wanted to keep their power. And many of those people, there were revolutions that overthrew them. So another impact is the American Revolution. The Enlightenment impacted that greatly, and one of the things was the system of checks and balances in the U.S. federal government. We talked about this in the last video when we went through Montesquieu, and what we have is your three branches of government. So if you look here, the blue is the executive branch, and that's their checks on these other two branches. The red is the judicial, that's their check on the executive branch, that's their check on the legislative branch. Green is legislative, that's their check on the executive, that's their check on the judicial branch. So you're going to go through this a whole lot more in government class in a couple of years. Your job this year is to understand the basics of it, and that each branch has powers, but not too much power. There's a separation there, and that the other branches have a check on that power, which means one branch can't just go willy-nilly doing anything that they want without having a check from the other branches. Two of our main philosophers, you got Hobbes and Locke, and then there's Rousseau. We talked about the differences in some of the social contracts between these people. When you look at Hobbes' contract, it's a contract between the people and the government, where the government holds power over the people, and the people have to give up rights. Rousseau is similar, but a little bit different. Rousseau's view is a contract between the people themselves, where they create a society and a government. So it's about who the contract is between. So like you and I, we talked about how a contract, teacher-student, and also, if you relate to Rousseau, you students have a contract among each other, where you're not going to come in, you're going to respect each other, you're not going to, do stupid things. Do kids violate this contract? Yes, all the time. All right. Now, this slide here is just to help you guys understand the difference between these three. So if you need kind of like one slide to really help you study and understand, the state of nature, what kind of government, what it should look like, and then where the power should be. This here will help you understand. You got Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau there. When you look at Beccaria would disagree with any form of torture to any suspected criminal. This was more or less an activity we were going to talk about in class. Again, here, this would be another thing that we would do in class. This is something I would like for you guys to consider after some stuff that we've learned. Why would you think, each of these people would be liberal or conservative? So that's going to be something in our Google Meet that hopefully if you're a part of or you're watching this. So this is something that we're going to do and we're going to talk about in our Google Meet. Now, again here, this is something that we talked about at the beginning of this lesson, was the differences in what was going on before the Enlightenment, what the Enlightenment ideas were, which is what we went over, and then now some new beliefs. So in religion, we should already know the church dominated everything, and the Enlightenment ideas were that people questioned the church's authority. As a result, we get new religions like Protestantism and Lutheranism. New churches essentially are established. Political rule, very similar. It was dominated by kings and queens. They had absolute power that was granted to them by the church. The government was only there to rule over the people. Well, now there's an idea that the government should exist to benefit the people, and that the rulers should serve their subjects. So it was kind of a flip on the way things were actually happening. So the new belief is that the people elect their leaders who govern on their behalf. So as you can see where this is heading, and what we're going to get into next are revolutions, because the rulers, the kings and queens, aren't going to want to give up their power, and the people want the power. So you're going to see this struggle, and you're going to see people try to overthrow their rulers in revolutions. And that's where we're going to go next. That actually will be after Christmas break. So I'm hoping you guys remember and make sense of all that. So you got a slide in your notes about what they wrote, which is right here at the top, and then what the founding fathers stole. Okay? So you got what they wrote here. This is just a background on it. And then this is what they stole. So if you look at Hobbes, basically we took the opposite idea of Hobbes and went the opposite way. We didn't do absolutism. We did the complete opposite of that. So we kind of took the contrarian view there. Next is John Locke. John Locke wrote 2 treatises of civil government. We took his All Men Are Created Equal, Life, Liberty, Property, and the Separation of Powers, which was expanded upon by this guy, which was Montesquieu. He wrote the Spirit of Laws, and we stole his 3 branches of government, checks and balances, separation of powers. And then you got Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We kind of connected his ideas with the ideas of Locke, Hobbes. All their ideas are connected, and you guys can see that on the previous slide I showed you with all of them. So when all that boils down to is these thinkers, their ideas, and the impact they had on the U.S. Constitution. So you got Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau, Voltaire, Beccaria. And then you have the impact. So we're getting specific here, and we're looking at the U.S. Constitution. All right. So remember, we had the Articles of Confederation after the Revolutionary War that didn't work. They were only there for 6 or 7 years. Then we needed the Constitution. This is something we're going to go through after break, but this is just getting you guys some information now so that it makes a little bit more sense later. So John Locke. You should already have his idea, and if you don't, here's a great way just to come here, get this, type it in that other slide. So, John Locke's idea, people had natural rights the government could not take away. The impact on the Constitution was personal rights, which is that first 10 amendments there is that we have a Bill of Rights. All right, and it limits the government's powers and gives rights to the people, which meaning the government can't take those rights away. Montesquieu believed different branches should have different powers. We get that system of checks and balances. If when we look at the Constitution in January, we're going to look at Articles 2, 3, and 4, which is the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, and they explain what those branches can do in those articles. And normally when you guys think of the Constitution, you only think of the amendments, and you don't think of the actual document before the amendments. Remember, amendments are just additions or changes to it. And there was a whole other document before that, and that's where Montesquieu came in. Rousseau, we get direct democracy. People elect those who govern them. That's where we get the idea of public elections. They talk about that in the first part of it, and then we get into who can vote and those types of things later on in the amendments as well. Voltaire, people should have personal freedoms. For example, freedom of speech and religion. That would be the First Amendment. Beccaria, laws exist to preserve social order and punishment should fit the crime. Basically, that's the 8th Amendment, protection for the accused. That's the 6th, 7th, and 8th, I guess. Protection for the accused and no cruel and unusual punishment. So, this here, we're actually going to get to this later on. This was something that we're going to look at again in January, so I'm not too worried about this. This is here us connecting Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. I used to do something here with this. I just left it in my slideshow, but it's not too important. So you guys should be right there. It's not too important at this point in time. It gets more important. All right, so you guys should have your notes done. If you have any questions, please make sure that you email me and let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for paying attention. Have a great day.